Hi, and welcome to the Firefly Adda, a virtual conversation starter, a platform where we showcase thought leaders from different walks of life who come and talk about various topics and share their pearls of wisdom. Today's episode, I would like to actually call out our guest a little differently and introduce him a little differently by quickly sharing my screen and typing his name on the Google search window. And here we go. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because the person in your screen right now, Rohan Chaubey. So Google recently, built out a knowledge graph on him, and it's quite a privilege to, be introducing him, this way. So a man who doesn't really need much of an introduction, the most followed growth hacker in India, Rohan Chaubey. Thank you so much, and welcome to the Firefly Adda.
Thank you, Kushagra. I'm honored to come here again.
So great. I mean, this is the second time we're sort of catching up, and I actually sort of promised you that the first time we worked on the content, it was so intriguing, and I did promise you that we're going to make a version 2.0. So here we
Yes,
are, and a very opportune moment to begin the conversation this way. And a very proud moment as well. So I quickly have one more sort of a slide to show you to dive into our conversation and the topic that we want to maybe talk about, which is this. So I think you have seen this before, and a very relevant sort of question. So would you want to maybe take a stab at this?
I saw this on your Instagram story and I couldn't stop laughing. But it's so true that COVID-19 has truly brought the digital transformation across the world in all the companies and industries.
No, very, very relevant because the term digital transformation pre-COVID was very, very ambiguous, even though there
Yeah.
were, tremendous efforts from different organizations to sort of, emphasize and talk about what digital transformation is. But more or less, it actually remained as a marketing terminology rather than, something which was executed by organizations. So very few organizations sort of understood and brought in that capability and went the way of the digital transformation. So I think this trigger, although very ironic, has actually brought in that lift and shift that organizations really need to embrace and go the digital way. So ironic is the right
True.
word,
Now
and
it's truly happening.
it has to, because if it doesn't, then I think companies are going to lose out, businesses are going to
True.
not be able to sustain and not run their not really get their ships to sort of stabilize. So on that note, I'll quickly stop sharing my screen and we'll just dive straight into the topic for today, where we talk about growth hacking and digital transformation and digitization and how things are sort of shaping up. So I think, Rohan, you would be hearing this term about digital being the new normal, most of the times. I wouldn't be surprised that if you would have heard this terminology, I think maybe about thousands of times in the last few months, so maybe a month and a half since COVID really struck us. So, so digital being the new normal. So, how do you see businesses sort of embracing this? We spoke about digital transformation and how companies have to sort of lift and shift to stay afloat. So, this pandemic has sort of forced businesses to really embrace digital transformation. So, how do you see businesses sort of embracing this and moving their ships forward?
So, as you know, I'm someone who has been evangelizing digital for so many years. I've
Hmm.
been working remotely from since 2016. So all this is not really new for me. But for people for whom this is new, and for the large scale industries and companies and corporates, I think at every level, how they can make a shift to digital is that now is the time we can truly find what is the best way to find productivity, teamwork, and keep continuing or producing what we were producing even when we are remote or socially distanced. So just giving a framework of how we have been operating a team of 10 or to the team of maybe 200 all remotely. There have been companies and case studies on these companies who have been making millions of dollars in revenues being remote, and these were very rare few companies which would be get glorified in the news because they are remote. Now we will start seeing so many others because now everyone is remote, and somehow they will figure out how to make this work. um, Meetings could turn into virtual meetings, daily check-ins on these apps that uh, to keep employees accountable. Everything that was stored locally could be moved to cloud, from conversations to storage. um, the businesses that were heavily dependent on face-to-face meetings, or having a physical space, like let's say for example the events industry, all events can be virtual events and summits and conferences. The people who were selling face-to-face could employ some remote sales, online sales strategies. So everything can actually be moved to digital. Even things like, let's say, e-commerce, where not e-commerce, the local shops or showrooms could actually have their digital outlets, and then things could be sold out from there. So everything can have a way to turn digital, including the educational sector. Or I think there would still be a percentage of things that cannot be moved to digital. Let's say the manufacturing units and other similar industries. But then the majority should be okay with what is happening. And the ones that cannot move to digital can continue working how they are, because that is mission critical for them to operate physically. So I think the shift is good for everyone. Silicon Valley, if moves to majorly digital or on cloud, I think it will totally benefit the entire world, as it will create equal opportunities for everyone. So I think, yeah, I think it took a pandemic for us to realize this model, but then I think it's good.
Yeah, better late than never. And this brings us to one fundamental sort of a question. And when we actually look at India as a market, and if you actually consider, say, a public sector bank as an example, so they weren't really very digital savvy, right? So their digital fundamentals were not really right from the onset of their establishment, and now they would actually be facing challenges to sort of do the day-to-day transactions. So and they, at the same time, they also have to sort of embrace the digital ways and means. Otherwise, their transactions, their availability, or their presence will actually not really be there. So how do you actually sort of look at these public sector banks sort of embracing the basic digital fundamentals and getting things in order?
I think the one thing is common is that most of them lack the digital infrastructure that is needed to have these operations carried out on scale. So let's say if the entire nation had to do all their take care of all their banking needs online, they should have thought about this even before the pandemic. So
Yep.
the right time to do was yesterday. But now that this has happened, I think now it will at least force who are not having the digital infrastructure set up. Now at least they would be forced to think in that direction and start creating it if it is not existing. Similarly, I was not taking names. I was with a bank that, let's say, when I had to create a simple FD, we had to go to the bank, do all the procedures. It would take at least 35-40 minutes to do it. I was surprised this evening when I was trying to create an FD online for the first time with this bank, and they have improved their digital infrastructure now, and I could create FD in just 10 seconds. No information was asked. I logged into the account, clicked on the buttons, and it was done. So I think so. Now that this is the change is happening, I see a lot of banks also embracing it and creating these infrastructure in and making sure that they are in place. So I think it's a very good move to take advantage of the situation and even prepare for the future.
That's true, Rohan. So then I think primarily, I think most of the organizations, be it your public sector banks or even your the BFSI sector or your insurance sector, or it could be your aviation or the manufacturing sector, I think are actually looking at maybe defining some new sort of personas into their sort of organizations. And one such persona that I actually believe comes to the forefront is the CDO, who's a chief digital officer. Now his or her role becomes really paramount, and all the organizations now will actually totally rely on the CDO's strategies going forward. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I think as CTOs and all the engineers have now, more responsibility and weight to carry, because these are the people who are going to show directions to what happens next, and they are the people who are going to drive innovations in the organizations.
Great. So then that brings us to a question about some key growth strategies, Rohan. So what are some of the key strategies businesses and organizations need to look at to be deployed during these times? Can you just shed some light on that?
Sure. So instead of diving into a lot of complexity, I would love to keep it simple. So let's say, be it any organization, now that we are not talking specifically about any industry, to keep it general, I would say, if be it any organization, I think they must focus on selling the must-have services versus the nice-to-have. So nice-to-have services are something when you serve your customers who would, let's say something like a luxury item, or something that you not is not really mission critical for your existence. So those services uh, can see a decline. So it's better if your organization has something that is a must-have service. That means without it, your customers cannot live. That those are the services that should be marketed well during these times. The second could be that how you can provide most value in what you're charging for. So let's say if you really want to retain customers during these times, I think the best way to do that is by over delivering. So not just walking a mile extra, but walking miles extra, because a lot of your competition is already walking a mile extra. Now they say that there is no traffic in the extra mile, but now there is traffic in the extra mile, so you have to go miles extra. And the third would be to think long term. I remember this quote from Jeff Bezos of Amazon. So he says that if some of his quarters go well, and when his friends congratulate him, he says that they do not know that for this quarter he actually planned 3 years ago. It's not the work of just the quarter. So I think companies need to have that long vision, like these visionary leaders have. Similarly, just to cite example of another company is Netflix. Netflix was asked, will there be a change in their calendars? And they said that 2020 calendars would remain the same, because they have already done all the work for 2020 and they are already planning for 2021 calendar. So I think every organization in the world should operate from a space where they already know, or they are in control of what is going to happen for the rest of the year. So they go from the place of reacting versus to responding. So reacting would be, like, what do we do if, let's say, if you are not Netflix and you produce shows just 6 months or 3 months in buffer, so you would be reacting. However, Netflix is just responding that all the shows were already shot, they just are in post production, so the team goes remote and continues doing the post production work. So that is more of responding. What else we can talk of? So next could be being frugal in a very dignified way. So cost cutting on marketing and mass firing, all these are done by companies that are not really having a long vision. To truly cut cost in a dignified way is to first, is like you mentioned, to automate as much as possible. So automation can actually take a lot of manual work, from the employees, and the employees could be used to do something that automation cannot do. So essentially, you're doing more in less by automating, plus making those employees whose work is taken by automation to make them do something else that automation cannot do. The second would be to invest in going on cloud. So let's say if you were having physical servers or any form of physical um, costs of keeping things or storage or anything, it could, or even offices. Now that we have the concept of virtual offices and storage or apps being deployed on cloud, and on cloud you're only paying for things that you are using and not really buying extras. So let's say, for example, let's say if you have an office and you're paying for 100 people and your organization just has 80. I mean, if the capacity is of 100 and your organization has 80, essentially you're paying for 20 extra. However, if you're operating from cloud, that means, let's say, using tools like these, maybe Zoom, or there is also a new concept of having like actual virtual offices where they actually have mini rooms virtually for people to collaborate. That means if you're in a particular same room, you can actually video conference with any of these people who are in the same virtual room as you. So all these interesting apps are cropping up, and I think there is a lot of benefit of being on the cloud. And the last key point I had was, um, identify who are the key producers versus the actors in your organization. So every organization has a segment of people who are more into theatrical performances than actual performers. So you can always identify. So if you really want to cut costs by firing people, you would want to fire people who are essentially actors or not mission critical for your business. You could, or if not fire, you can always pause them for the time being until the crisis or chaos is over, and then you focus on continue being working with people who are the actual top performers. So I think these are the most dignified way in which you can cut costs.
Sure. So you did touch upon the manufacturing sector and a few other sectors which cannot really be following the trends of being digitized and embracing digital transformation sort of that easily. So what would your recommendations to leaders who actually run such sectors be from a digital digitization standpoint? Do they now look at newer ways of staying afloat, by not looking at the operations and looking at maybe their brand equity, getting some campaigns and strategies to help them get their brand equity going during these times when their operations are sort of shut?
Yeah, I think I read this in a very good book. I'm not able to recollect, but there was a really good sentence there. It says that see your cost of marketing has the cost of production. So let's say if you are a production company manufacturing something physical, and so during the World War there was this product which was not allowed to be produced, but they kept on going with the marketing. And when after a few years, I think 5 or something, when it came to the market again, they were already on the top charts because they've continued to market even when they were not in the market. So I think what I'm trying to say is that consider the cost of marketing as your production cost, and not not separated from the production cost, and cut to the extent that you would cut for the production. So let's say if you're producing something, and if there is a proper resource optimization to be done, so you will only cut it to the extent where it is necessary, not too much. Same is with marketing. I think instead of seeing it as a selling price or cost of selling, see it as the production cost. So I think that would do justice to the brand, and that's where that brand equity comes in, where you're not really harming it when the times are tough, instead building it for the future.
Yeah, so another prompter on the travel and hospitality industry. I mean, they're pretty, hit pretty badly. So, we touched upon VR as a topic, either in this conversation or a previous conversation. And I think you aligned, the VR aspects really well to the hospitality and travel industry. So, can you actually sort of emphasize on that a little more?
Sure. So let's say startups like unicorns like Zomato, Swiggy, and Oyo. Oyo started, instead of giving rooms to travelers and people who are traveling, they started giving rooms to people who want to work from home, from a quiet place with good internet connectivity. So they kind of, pivoted in these times, maybe temporarily, but they did. Same is with Zomato and Swiggy. They started their delivery services, just not just food delivery, but also the essentials. We had a client who wanted to build a website for a travel company, and we suggested them that maybe you can also do something with VR tourism. So now that at least people won't be traveling for 3 to 6 months, so maybe this could be something that you can explore, and they were willing to do that. And there was this another local showroom who wanted to create a website, and again our suggestion was that no one is looking for furnitures. Maybe they are for their office setup, but no one is looking for buying furnitures during the pandemic. But yes, you can always sell the most essential ones on your website, and you can then home deliver it. So I think everything should be the entire transaction should happen online, and you just have to come and deliver offline. And I think this is the best way to go about every kind of business that is selling offline. They could see what they can be. Even talking of the local markets who share um, uh, the I mean sell the essentials. The local government here created an app to home deliver, order, get everything home delivered. So I think the shift is happening, and it's happening for good.
Yeah, staying on that point about AR, VR, there's also AI and deep machine learning, which is very prominent when it actually comes to positioning products and solutions. So you spoke about the amalgamation of AR, VR to digital marketing. So how does AI and sort of ML, have a role to play in this whole era of digital marketing?
So a lot of tools that we see right now, and a lot of processes that we do in digital marketing initially now can be done via AI algorithms. So let's say, for example, if you're running media buying campaigns,
Hmm.
I know a lot of tools that actually can optimize entire campaigns for you and even run it and do pretty well even without any human interference. Another good example is now we also have tools that write or do even copywriting, all using AI.
Hmm.
So it is quite interesting that where we are heading, and I think automation will not really. I mean, this uh, makes me think that automation is actually killing jobs of these writers, digital marketers. But I think it's not really killing jobs, but actually transforming the jobs and changing jobs, not killing.
So I think another very interesting blog that I actually read about ITC Infotech, getting digital buddies for the 9,000 employees. Again, a very automation related question. So I believe you also read this, and you have some sort of a perspective around this. So very interesting. One of its kind organization who's actually building digital personas and creating digital buddies for its employees. So what do you think about this move?
I think it's very interesting. From, of course, from a productivity standpoint, I think it's a good move. Some things that can easily be done by AI and does not really require a lot of human thinking. Uh, Things can be automated, a few set of questions or things that can be, let's say sending out reports or answer to common questions or anything it could be that is possible for an AI to do, which can be done. Why not do it through bots? and the things that truly require the skills that in AI cannot compete with humans on is something that can be done by the employees. So I think it's a very good move, and I think or if this test run or whatever they are doing goes well, I think all organizations should think in that direction as well.
So staying on AI, another very interesting one. So AI cameras to track social distancing. This is again one of its kind. So what do you think about that?
Wonderful. So whether it be tracking social distancing, we saw it in China that bots were serving people in the hospitals. I think it is also happening now in India, Bangalore, like you mentioned to me.
Yeah.
So I think very interesting, and I think this is also so always constraints or restrictions uh, fuel creative thinking, right? So now that we are not allowed to, I mean, now that we have to maintain social distancing, it is an infectious, um, what do we say? Is it a disease, or is it
Yeah,
right to say it is a
yeah,
disease?
yeah, it is. It is.
So, so now that we have these constraints, it has forced us to think more creatively,
Mhm.
and I think that's how solutions and inventions are always happen.
Absolutely. So now a very key question that I actually had in my mind. So I believe in the three E's, which is your empathy, empowerment, and enablement. Yeah. So these three E's. So
Wonderful.
yeah, how do you think that organizations should actually start looking at the art of storytelling? During these times, do they look at just trying to push a sell on somebody's face, or do they actually bring in these three E's to the fore to actually build that connect with their end customers?
Okay, so I remember there was a lot of conversation in the salespeople communities where people were asking, how do they continue selling when we are in, amidst a crisis. So I think as far as you're selling to serve, there's no harm in really selling unless if you feel confident that what you're selling is really helping people. So if let's say if you're able to tweak your messages to touch the pain points of people right now and how they can navigate this new world, I think that's the uh, best selling point that you can have. For like I mentioned, go for things that are must have services. Those would be that something that would be mission critical for your customers. uh, Pick the pain point and craft your messages and tell the story along those lines.
Great. So I think one, again, an Indian market perspective question again, this cultural shift, for our end sort of users or customers or whoever is sort of consuming the product or the services. Digital is not something that they are used to, and they also have to accept and agree and adapt to digital being the new normal, because India as a market is not a digitally matured market unlike the other countries. So how do you actually see this cultural shift coming from maybe the end consumers? There are product companies, services companies, which have already taken the mantle of pushing digital transformation as one of their key strategies. But how does an end consumer or an end customer understand this, and how do they actually accept and adapt the whole idea of this digital transformation?
So as far as they can, reduce the friction or make it convenient,
Hmm.
then I think it would be easier for consumers to adapt to this. So I think it is more on the um, companies and brands side or of how they want to do it and how they can reduce the friction or how they can make it more convenient for consumers to adapt to this.
So I think at the end of the day, it's all about customer experience, and any
Yeah,
organization which actually sort of looks at that a little more closely and brings in that innovative aspect around digital strategies, I think they will be far more successful as compared to any of their competition. Yeah.
truly, truly. As far as it is customer centric,
Hmm.
development, everything would be good, I think.
Now, a question around time to market. Now, with everything going digital, the speed to communication with whatever you actually make by making digital as the catalyst for your sort of your communication. So, how does the speed to communication actually comes into the whole sort of affairs? Does it actually make 5G and quantum very imperative? So otherwise companies tend to lose out to competition if they are not really looking at that a little more closely. So what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so we need to see, where do we require synchronous versus asynchronous communication
Hmm.
for things where, that you would buy offline, where you have real-time communication going on. And if those things are taken to digital platforms, those places would require synchronous communication. However, things that are not really time critical or time sensitive can be dealt with asynchronous communication. And what was the second part of the question?
Yeah, so it's about 5G and quantum coming into the state of affairs. So I mean, everybody sort of needs to adapt to this real quick, otherwise they'll actually sort of lose out to the competition. So speed to communication and time to market becomes
True,
really vital. Yeah.
true.
Absolutely. So, a couple of more questions, and then we can sort of, close out our discussion. So, I think one very relevant one about key takeaway for the audiences on how they can actually strike it right with their digital strategies.
Yeah, so I think the best time to what's the best thing to do right now is to think more of how you can retain the existing customers that you have, what retention strategies you would apply, and what would be your acquisition strategy in the sense that how you can onboard more users, reducing their pain points or whatever is causing them to not get your solutions. To give an example to this is, let's say for example, I was working with this video editing company. I mean, they have taken a desktop app video editing platform to cloud, and so their mission is that you don't really require, so for usually for video editing you require a specific uh, desktop where there are you must have some graphic cards or storage or whatever it be. So they're trying to take that hardware on the cloud, so as to empower users, seeing that your system configuration shouldn't stop you from video editing. So people may not really think of spending money for an app like this during times when it is during the tough times. So what they're doing is they're making all the um, templates for videos free for people and offline businesses who are affected by the lockdowns and business shutdowns, and for indefinite period of time until this pandemic lasts. So at least they are onboarding new customers, and when the pandemic is over, these same customers are going to remember them and maybe start using their platform for creating marketing videos for them. So I think this is one good strategy. I saw another company. So I'm taking this from an article that I wrote for a media publication called Your Story. And that article was very widely shared. It was trending on the site and it got 1,03,000 claps. So another example of a similar company is now that so many salespeople that used to go on fields and actually have face-to-face meetings with the clients and prospects, this company has come up with a unique solution. They have created a pitch deck kind of flow where you could attach PDFs, documents, your voice notes, your videos, everything that you can imagine in a series of. Imagine this as a PowerPoint, but PowerPoint with all kinds of multimedia.
Hmm.
So this could actually replace the requirement to have face-to-face meetings, and the same platform also enables the buyers and sellers to communicate to each other if they have any questions. So I think technologies like this for sales and for any vertical is something that could benefit from onboarding users during this time. So when customers are in a position to buy, and even if they buy out of necessity right now, they are at a good place. So I mean, they're doing it from a good place to be of service. So like I said, if you're selling for service, you would do well. So I think that that answers your question of,
Yeah.
sorry, I don't remember the question.
The digital strategies as a key takeaway for the audience. So what can they actually strike it right from that
Yeah,
perspective? Yeah. I remember another article that I actually read about Coursera, making about 3,800 odd sort of courses free for the unemployed. So this is again another way of sort of, giving back to the society and making sure that
true.
people, get enabled, upskill, during the downtime. So that another example which actually sort of complements to what you were saying. So maybe one last one, Rohan, on the success mantra for the audience to take away. So you want to pick up the same one that we spoke the last time around, and
Yeah,
you
I
didn't really
guess.
speak about the growth set either. So I would love to
Yeah,
hear about the growth set again. So yeah,
sure. So in every kind of discussion that I get invited to, I say one thing in common is that learn from people who are doing better than you, teach people who need your guidance, and collaborate with people I mean, collaborate with people you think are in similar boat as you. And even before this pandemic happened, I launched a book last year called the Growth Hacking Book. It became an international bestseller in 9 countries. So, in the book, I'm suggesting a concept called growth set. So, a lot of people ask me, "What do you do? What do I do to become a growth hacker?" I suggest them to work on their growth set. So, I put growth set by a mathematical formula, that is skill set plus tool set plus mindset. Now, I want to highlight the concept of mindset, because in the book we say that how to navigate the business ups and downs, and how to be more proactive versus being reactive. So I think, when when all of this started, I was just thinking and reflecting on all that we wrote last year, and it is so relevant for this year. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that.
fantastic, fantastic, Rohan. So love to thank you for being a part of the Firefly Adda. Yeah. This is the second time
Thank you
around we're
for having
having
me.
a conversation, and it was really brilliant. I'm sure the kind of insights that the audience would actually get from this will actually keep them in great stead in understanding how to keep their digital transformation journey going. Thank you once again, and you stay safe and have a wonderful day ahead. Yeah, take care.
Thank you.